Good morning. My name is Ademola Adetunji. I'm the research associate in charge of the MT data and its products for Meta-Earth. I'm just going to provide you with an update regarding our latest baby in the family. Over the last summer, we went to Hope Bay to acquire a large-scale MT data over the Hope Bay Greenstone belt within the Slave province. So I would let Rasmus talk about all the good stuff relating to the geology and the preliminary interpretation of what we have in the MT model so far. So I'll just simply introduce you to the MT data. So this is the Hope Bay Greenstone belt right here, and this adjacent belt is the Ilu belt. So the idea is to understand the crustal architecture in this region, and that's basically, image the variation in resistivity structure at the Hope Bay, and a secondary objective is to understand the relationship between the Hope Bay Greenstone belt and the Ilu belt here, and ultimately compare the results with. And bear in mind that this is an endowed belt, so we want to compare the results with what we have in the Abitibi Greenstone belt so far. So we occupied a total of 117 stations, and 87 of those were arranged in a 3D format to give us a complete coverage of the Hope Bay Greenstone belt. We didn't go that up north here because of a lot of salt water. And we extended two profiles across from the Hope Bay to the Ilu, up here and here, so that we can, look at our secondary objective. And so what did we do differently? I mean, apart from those 87, we also had 30 data sets clustered around the known deposit at the Boston and the Madrid up north here. So what we did differently as compared to Abitibi here is we use a 3D grid in our data acquisition plan. That way, the question of off-profile, unreliable structures and all that will be totally solved. And also, rather than using AMT to image the known structures, we use the broadband MT. And I've had a lot of questions about what's the difference between MT, AMT, so that's why I included this graphical. This is just to give you a visual understanding of the difference between MT, AMT, and broadband MT. So the AMT extends from the 10,000 hertz to 10 hertz. So it's just always like short, this length. However, the MT goes from 400 hertz all the way to 1,000, 2,000, 2,600 in most cases seconds. But the broadband now combines these two. It extends from 10,000 hertz to as far as we can go, depending on how long we stay there at the station. So that means we can independently model this area and obtain information from very shallow depth, like a few hundred meters, all the way to the upper mantle. And so the idea of the source to sink would be easy to follow. And so we had a lot of difficulties in this region, being high latitude and whatnot. So the aurora associated noise, helicopter flying around all the time, structural problems and all that. But we were able to overcome majority of those problems a little bit in terms of filtering our data and all that. But what we couldn't get rid of was the salt water. So this is the TIPA data. This is a component of our data. We acquired 6 component data. The impedance is the 4 components of the impedance and the TIPA. But the TIPA is very, very sensitive to conductors. That's the essence of TIPA, for us to be able to delineate where we have conductors. So here are they plot from two bands, 1 second to 100 seconds band of TIPA data. And you can see the consistency. This is plotted using Parkinson convention, where the arrows point towards the conductor. So you can see the consistency in the direction. And this is all pointing towards the most conductive direction, which is the salt water. And that renders this part of our data useless, basically. So, however, the good news is at a shorter period, and periods longer than 100 seconds, we can still salvage a little bit of TIPA here and there, but that's really, as you can see, this is 0.1 second. We have a bunch of reversers indicating we have an anomaly. But however, this has to be treated with a sort of grain because the TIPA coils were not buried up to 3 meters in most cases because of permafrost and all that. So, but that is still being investigated. But around here, we were able to salvage a little bit here and there to, include, at least, make use of a little bit of the money we spent. And for the impedances, all the cultural noise and the rural noise problem, we've been able to process and reprocess over and over again to obtain something really clean. Is this one side and another side, and this shows a combination of all the sides. What we cannot get rid of in this case is the 3D part of our phase data. As you can see, this gently rolling out of quadrant phase. This indicates the 3D nature of the subsurface, which is, we can see in some of this data. However, some of them, they line up pretty good. So since we are modeling and inverting in 3D environment, we don't have to worry about this. The inversion code will take care of all that. Now, this is my favorite part of the MT. It's the phase tensor. It's always the part that is, I would say, incorruptible. So whatever you see in there is ultimately what you're going to find in your model. It gives you like a mirror to the future. So when you look at this in your data, you can be confident about whatever you see, if you find something similar in the model at the end of the day. So if you look at these closely, so we plotted these along these 5 profiles. And if you look at this closely, you would find like something we'll call 4-layer system. The resistive, conductive, relatively resistive or conductive, depending on what you're comparing it with, and a conductive lower band. However, the limitation of MT would not allow us to image these 3 layers. It's just going to combine them into a single conductive layer. So what we would expect in our model eventually would be a resistive upper part and a conductive everywhere else. So with that, in the back pocket, we created a 3D model. Now this model is based solely on impedance. We have another variation that is based on the some inclusion of the TIPA. But this is the TIPA, impedance only model. 3D along the same set of profiles being shown here. And as indicated by the phase tensor, we can see that we have purely 2-layer system, the resistive upper crust and the conductive mid to lower crust, with a bunch of low resistivity corridors that Rasmus would probably tell us what some of them mean. I don't want to go into more details on that. Now, like I said, the idea of 3D is to have a degree of freedom where we can slice and dice our model in any direction and be confident about the structure we find in there. So this is a section along this profile from south to north. And so it ultimately shows us that we have resistive and resistive upper crust and conductive mid to lower crust. And in a different direction, we have the same thing. This is right along the belt itself. And with inclusion of these 2 prominent low resistivity corridors that are connected to mid to lower crust. And try to look at what is the connection between the Hope Bay and Ilu. So far, what I can find is they're not the same. But we wanted to understand whether it's just the same belt or different, but there seems to be a west dipping boundary that is conductive in between these two belts. So look at these two profiles we ran across both belts. And this is an isosurface, conductive isosurface. This was produced by the Agnico Eagle guys. They believe that those two prominent low resistivity corridors are related to the Boston anomaly and another North Spider anomaly that Rasmus would probably talk about. And this like north-south linear conductivity anomaly, they think it's the Ilu belt itself, but I think it's just the boundary between the Ilu and the Hope Bay. But yet, this is still a preliminary stage. Now, in terms of comparison with Abitibi, so I tried just to pull a real data, again, data that is not the phase tensor data from the teamings here with a section from the Hope Bay. And we can see that we have a similar set of layers, the upper 1, 2, 3, 4 layers with four different set of resistivity values. But ultimately, when this was modeled for teamings, we had a two-layer system, a resistive upper cross and conductive mid to lower cross with a bunch of fingers here and there. So and this is a section from Hope Bay, a section from Suez. And if I, just remove this, you might think this is from Abitibi. So it's more like a mirror image in most cases. There is this similarity between the crust in terms of resistivity, between the crust of the Hope Bay and that of the Abitibi. And these are slices from different part of the Abitibi. This is from Suez, this is Timmins, and this is Matheson, the same structure. Hope Bay, Larder Lake, and Malartic can keep going on. And so essentially, the result as of this moment is that the resistivity structure up north and the Abitibi is very similar. But whether what is responsible for this resistivity is the same thing or the same geological history is a different ball game that Rasmus will talk about. So now we go into more detailed work in terms of like finalizing this. The most important is accounting for the saltwater content, which would necessitate constrained inversion. So I've done a little bit of this, but I need more information in order to put more detailed geology into the initial model and see how I can account for that, especially in the impedance part of the modeling, and then finally create a more meaningful geological model for this area. So thank you.